Hey everybody, Johnny D. Good here, located somewhere in Hutchinson, maybe? Somewhere in Kansas. Let me double check here. Halstead, Kansas. Anyway, we are traveling on Highway 50 today. Today is Friday, December 5th, 2014. Local time here is 9:42 a.m. Temperature is at 46 degrees. We are currently heading for City of Industry, California, which is 1,374 miles away from here. Our delivery date schedule is on Sunday, 100 hours on Sunday. So, yep. Right now we have 8 hours and 7 minutes available left to drive for today. I started my clock somewhere around 6 o'clock this morning. Not a whole lot going on. Nothing exciting. I know you guys have seen this road lots of times. Something I would like to introduce you to a guy I have known for a very, very long time. His name is Christopher. Of course, I will introduce you to him as a name, a person of memory. He is not physically here, but he has been a big part of my life. I have met him somewhere as far back as 1974. His name is Christopher Aban. Christopher was a native of Camiguin Island, native of Leon, Ginsiliban, Camiguin Island. He was a very simple man, a very gentle man. He took me, he was one of our hired laborers, as good as any description, I guess. My dad had this humongous project, a resort project going on in the island back then. He was one of many, many hired hands that we had, my dad had. He was a native. He was pretty sure he was born and raised in that village, or in that barrio, we call it. But over the years, he's proven to be trustworthy. He was he became a friend. He became a really good friend, and he stood out among many. My earliest recollection of memory as a childhood was quite fond with interacting with him. I remember these stories that he used to tell me about. The story and the plot was always about a princess, a wicked king, and a nobody named Juan, which of course Juan is John. And for some reason, this princess is always in trouble and always been locked up by this wicked king. And over the years, it was always the same plot, different story each time, but it was always the same plot. So it always, Juan would come to great lengths and difficulties of rescuing the princess. And of course, Juan would always be the hero, and at the end of the story, Juan would always get the girl, as they say. Many stories. I don't remember the details of all the stories and all of that, but well, it wasn't always a wholesome story of a 4 or 5 year old, little boy should be hearing. Just, but yeah, it sometimes it was a little too exciting, you know what I mean? You certainly wouldn't find that kind of a bedtime stories that you would read to an American child. But this story was almost always told it was like a bedtime story all the time. And I don't know, it's never uncommon back home to share a bed with someone, and that's how close we got. We over the years, we've shared a room, shared a bed, shared the campfires, but anyway, once again, he used to tell me all these stories. I'm sure he made up all these stories as he goes along with it. But I remember some occasions where, the stories got a little rated R. Oh. But over the years growing up, he taught me how to climb coconuts. He taught me how to go fishing. Taught many native things. Taught me how to eat raw fish, and let's put it this way. When I met him, I was the rich man's son, migrated into that barrio, and when I was a little boy, believe it or not, I looked real American. I had blonde hairs, and I had very white complexions, as most American Filipino children are. I don't know why that is, but when a child of an American and a Filipino woman from birth, it always somehow has white complexions and over the but when adulthood sets in, then it gets, we get darker somehow. But anyway, here's the story I'm trying to convey is arriving in Leo, I was different from all the kids of the barrio. They saw me as an outsider. They saw me as a foreigner, or a son of a white man. But I also when growing up and befriending Christopher, little by little, time and time, I became darker. I became little by little doing, as a child, I played with their games. I started to speak their language, their dialect. So yeah, over the years, I became little by little one of them. And I became, I slowly started to be accepted as one of them. And then later on, I became them. Even though I still had different complexions and different looks, but that's how that's the magnitude of the impact of Christopher with me, or on me. And another thing too is that, in another perspective, I did not always stay in the barrio. I traveled. I traveled many places and lived different places, but see, Leong has always been my home. And sometimes I feel a little bit, I feel a little bit guilty, and I feel a little bit lost because I don't, I'm not there every day. I miss out on certain events. But whenever I get home, he would always be there. Most especially when my dad and my mom divorced back in 1979, I think it was. He was very, very loyal to my mom. And even throughout the years that my mom was broke, totally broke, just living off the land and scrounging around and whatever, he stayed at the house. There was no more income to be made, but he stayed and lived in the house with my mom and among others, and they depended on each other while I was in abroad living with my dad. So yeah, and then whenever I came home, he would always be there, and we'd always pick up where we left off, and he became part of my family. But the bad thing about Christopher, he loves to drink. He always loved to drink. He drank just about anything that was available. I mean, anywhere from coconut wine to the, you know, to the cheapest beer or cheapest whiskey or rum. And I even got to he even taught me how to drink coconut wine at a very, 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 very early age. You know, growing up in a barrio like that, there are no such thing as alcohol age limit, or, you know, nothing like that. So yeah, I mean, anyway, so over the years, every time I'd go home, he'd always be there. And I go home, I you know, always, not always, but most of the time, bring him some gifts and introduce him to some people. And I remember a couple of vacations that I do a long time ago is whenever I get home to the Philippines from the States, when I started living here as an adult, I would go home, I would bring all the clothing that I have, everything I could pack, and bring it home with me. And whenever I leave, I would always, you know, give away all my clothes. And they were just as happy to receive my old clothes as they would as new clothes and shoes and shirts and whatever. A couple of times I remember, it has always been my tradition to go swimming in the ocean, and in the spring, you know, moments or hours before I would leave. And you know, when you actually go swimming, you always wear your underwear and your shorts, you know. I remember a couple of times when I would get out of the water, he, you know, him or his 10 other brothers would wait for me. And they would take the clothes that I was wearing that was wet, and they would, and of course, you know, once you have dirty clothes, you don't, you know, wet clothes, you don't want to bring it with you. So they would wait until I would take it off, and they would, you know, they would grab it. Even though he was he was a drunk. I mean, he wasn't a total drunk. He just loved to drink. But he never got violent. He was the eldest of 10 or 12 brothers. He somehow always, he had something about him that many of us in the barrio gave him a little bit more respect than others. There was some, I don't know, there's just something about the guy. As I said, he was gentle, never married. I remember so many memories of him. And about a year ago, I sent him a brand new Maglite flashlight. And among my travels, one in particular was in Western Samoa. The son of a king in Samoa gave me a dagger. Oh, the dagger wasn't all that elegant. It was just, I don't know what kind of dagger it was. It wasn't all that nice or expensive. But nevertheless, Kenny Lameta was the son of a very prominent chief in Western Samoa. Gave me that knife, and I brought it home and I gave it to him, and I explained it to him that that knife belonged to, to Kenny, a prince. And I gave it to him, and he used it quite daily. I mean, growing up in a barrio or in the Philippines, knives and bolos and sharp objects are your daily tool. I mean, it's almost like a screwdriver to an electrician. You don't go anywhere without your tool belt. And in the barrio, that's everybody that went anywhere carried a knife or a bolo or anything like that. And over the years, he has used that knife. But last night I received word that he died. And I miss him so much. About 2 to 3 weeks ago, I've learned that he got sick. He was in bed. He went to the hospital and the doctor sent him home. And I kind of knew, even 3-4 weeks ago, that he wasn't gonna make it. And about 3-4 weeks ago, when I called him up, and something about Christopher always was a very soft-hearted man, and there was something about him that even when he got drunk, a lot of people, when they get drunk, they get violent. Well, Christopher was different. He was exactly the opposite. He would always end up kissing people. He would get emotional and he would start kissing people on the cheek, and I remember And that used to always annoy me and other people when when he gets drunk. We would not get close to him because whenever he get drunk, he would pull you and give you a hug and give you a kiss, and we don't know that. We always knew that when, we would stay away from a distance from him when he was drunk because, well, we didn't want to be we didn't want to be hugged, and he would always give you a very tight hug, and he would kiss you, and he'd smell really bad to whatever he was drinking. And so 3 weeks ago when I called him, I told him that I loved him. And the last thing I heard from him was him wailing. And he couldn't talk on the phone anymore. He gave the phone to somebody. But I heard his voice. He was I guess that was our farewell. That was our moment of farewell and goodbye. And I miss him so dearly. I remember every time I go home in the island back then, he would always ask that make sure I brought home a pair of slippers. But he didn't like the slippers that had a little tongue between your toes, like, most common slippers, you slip in and there's that little thing between your toes. Yeah, he hated that. He didn't like that. He liked those open sandals. And that I remember about him. And there are so many people like him back home that have died and gone. That I have missed, and that's why I feel like a stranger back home, because there are so many people dying, so many new kids and generations that are being born, and slowly the Leo, the Barrio that I knew is almost gone. You know, I guess it's a new time now. I have not been home in about 11 or 12 years. Well, 14, I guess. Last time I went home was when my dad died in Sheboygan, and it was always his last wish to be brought home. And to be buried in our property. And that was in the year 2000, so 2014, 2015. It has been the longest time that I have not been home. And I feel like a stranger. I feel like I have no right to go home anymore, you know? They have been through some thick and thin, some horrible things, and happy memories, and I'm out here. Sometimes I feel like I don't have the right to call Leon my own. But I also know, without a doubt in my heart, that whenever I do get home, it will be just as it was. People would still welcome me with open arms. And I would always still be treated as one of them. Anyway, farewell, Christopher. I'm gonna miss you, man. Thank you for all the memories. You will always be in my heart.